calling on UNB to take a hard look at one of its own professors. The professor in question is Ricardo Duschesne. He teaches at UNB-SJ. Duschesne argues that overwhelming numbers of immigrants are threatening Canada's white European character. Critics say it's blatantly racist. Vancouver City Councillor Carrie Jang questions whether Duschesne is fit to teach in the classroom. Duchesne's union is defending his academic freedom. Here's part of what Ricardo Duschesne had to say to the CBC's Rachel Cave about it.
As a PhD student living in Toronto, I was growing skeptical of this emphasis on multiculturalism, because here we have a situation in which at that time, this is when 250, 260 were coming in as a result of some changes in Mulroney's conservative government. And so you could really see hundreds of thousands of immigrants arriving in Toronto. And what struck me was that we have people that want to come to Canada, long to be in that country, and then when they arrive, they're somehow made to feel that Canada doesn't quite have a substantive culture for you. It is you who has the culture, and we want to encourage you to retain it. We want you to celebrate it. This is a country that celebrates the cultures of other people. And so when you ask yourself, well, what is Canada's culture? It was reduced basically to modern technology, cars, fast food restaurants, and the fact that it is a multicultural nation. So I saw something wrong there in the sense that the immigrants are being encouraged to celebrate their traditions and customs, whereas the native Canadians are encouraged to be just multicultural and to somehow take for granted their own native traditions. In the case of Toronto, that it was a heavily Anglo city. And it is true that Anglo culture, on the surface, is more subdued and quiet. But to me, it is still a culture. There's mannerisms, forms of expression, walking, talking, that are really important to people. So I didn't like that idea that the host nation brushes aside its own heritage and history and people in order to accommodate people from another culture.
You talked about being a proponent of organic immigration, but not this overwhelming immigration. Can you describe the distinction?
You think of Canada as a body that can handle so much coming inside and for the different parts to stay in balance. What happened in Vancouver, in my estimation, in other cities in Canada, is that the incoming in Vancouver of Asians and Chinese was too fast, too quick. So essentially, we had a situation in which within a matter of a few years, a very British city, a beautiful British city, took on a strongly Asian character. You walk to schools, to universities, high schools, and in many cases you will see almost only Chinese or Asian students. And I think that that's not organic. The only way it has worked, or one of the ways it has worked, is because the native Anglo population was made to feel that you better not react. There was early in the 1990s a controversy about the so-called monster homes, which is that some very wealthy Chinese would buy beautiful, aged British homes and just dismantle them to build these so-called monster homes. And there was a reaction, this is racism, how could you say that? So at that time, I remember as a graduate student having a conversation with other students saying, no, I actually think that they have every reason to feel disquiet, uncomfortable with the way their neighborhood is being transformed, because if you're born there, is that where your parents grew up? Those are the streets that you know. You have affection for them. You don't want to see them transform from one day to the next. Whereas if it had been a more organic, gradual form of immigration, then you could have some Chinese coming in. I don't mind. I mean, and most of the opponents I have met of immigration, they don't mind diversity. They go to Chinese restaurants. But they do mind a situation in which You go to neighborhoods and you don't see the Canada of the 60s and 50s anymore. And that has to go back to the initial question, who created this nation? And the people who created this nation have a right to decide how they want the nation to be shaped.
But is not the whole world going global? Are we not becoming more mixed? And are we not gaining from the free flow of ideas and cultural exchange? Or is this not the new normal?
No, I mean, one of the most deceptive arguments that are used by those who make this claim, and they're being used by high-level intellectuals and academics like Wilkin Licca and Charles Taylor. I just wrote an essay about Charles Taylor that will be published in the New Brunswick Law Journal. And what they want to do is create this impression that what is happening in Canada and in Europe is part of a natural process of globalization, that we just need to adapt to it. Well, in the first place, Japan has a fertility rate that is lower or as low as that of Canada or European nations. The same goes for South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, that have very low fertility rates. And yet, despite some pressure by global forces for them to accept immigrants, they have said no. And they vocally say that we don't want to lose our cultural character and heritage. Now, no one calls them racist. People say, no, they're just Japanese. They want to be Japanese, and good for them.
But you're not, are you suggesting that what they've done is better than what Canada has done? Is that what you would like to see Canada do? Restrict immigration?
Oh yes, but I mean, it doesn't have to be what Japan has done, because Japan is practically zero immigration. So my view is that when you look at settler countries like the United States, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, that there is a sense in which immigration play a bigger role in the modern era. But that doesn't mean that you have to have continuous open borders.
So you don't filter your views in any way when you're in front of a classroom of students, whether they're international or otherwise, would hear from you on this?
One thing I do, and I can say that I do this probably more than anybody else, is that I present the argument for multiculturalism, for immigration in its strongest possible way. Because I myself want to know, it really matters to me, am I right to question this line of argument? I want to see the strongest case they can make, and I present it to the students, and I tell them things like, this sounds persuasive, this is good stuff, and I don't blame you if you're drawn into it, and then I emphasize to them again, if you want to follow or feel more comfortable with this line of reasoning, go along with it. You're not going to be penalized for that, but this is the line of reasoning that I tend to sympathize with, and these are criticisms of diversity and immigration. I am living in New Brunswick now, and so I would say, do you wish to have a real debate? Do you want St. John and Fredericton to look in a slightly smaller way the way Toronto and Montreal look?
Ricardo Duschesne teaches at UNB SJ. He was speaking to the CBC's Rachel Cave.